Imagine a child's drawing stopping a courtroom cold and dragging into the light what adults have been swallowing for years. The morning session at municipal court is already in motion. Wooden benches, scarred and shiny at the edges, hold a mix of coats still damp from the drizzle outside. There's a faint smell of wet pavement and coffee carried in on sleeves. People murmur in low tones, eyes drifting between the big clock on the wall and the stack of files in the clerk's hands. Every few seconds, paper rustles as another case moves a little closer. Judge Caprio adjusts his glasses, flips a page, and calls the next name. Case of improper parking near the Children's Hospital. Ms. Carter. She rises from the front bench, a woman in her early 30s, clothes neat but tired. Dark circles shadow her eyes, her hair is pulled back with the kind of haste that comes from too many early mornings. She holds her handbag to her side like a shield. Beside her, a boy of 8 slides off the bench with quiet care, a small notebook clutched in his hands. They walk to the podium. The boy doesn't fidget or tug at his mother's sleeve. He looks around with a seriousness that doesn't match his size, then sits at the small side chair and opens his notebook on his knees. A stubby pencil appears from his pocket. He bends over the page, already somewhere far from the room's low buzz. Caprio glances at the ticket. Ms. Carter, you were cited for parking in a restricted zone outside the pediatric entrance. You understand the violation? Yes, Your Honor. Her voice is steady, but her fingers knot together on the edge of the lectern. I do. He nods. We'll get to the details. This is your first time here. She hesitates. Yes, sir. Behind her, someone coughs. Another case, another morning. Nothing about it suggests anything different from the half-dozen before. The boy keeps drawing, head bent, feet dangling a few inches above the floor. His mother glances back just once to make sure he's still there, then returns her attention to the bench. She explains, quietly, about the hospital, the rush, the signs she saw and ignored. Her words are careful, trimmed down, as if she's learned not to take up too much space. Caprio listens, one hand resting on the file. His questions are routine. How long were you parked? Did anyone warn you? The clerk notes the answers. A thin man near the back checks his watch. Outside, car tires hiss along wet streets. Then the boy suddenly stands. The movement is small, but in the settled rhythm of the room it feels like a bell. His chair scrapes softly. He walks straight to the bench, notebook held out in both hands. Excuse me, he says, voice clear but not loud, I made this for you. The bailiff half steps forward, then stops when Caprio raises a palm. The judge leans down, surprised, and takes the paper. The drawing isn't the usual stick figures and houses. It shows a hospital bed, a child lying in it with wires sketched in gray pencil. Beside the bed is a man in a robe that looks suspiciously like a judge's, holding the child's hand. Above them, in uneven block letters, the boy has written, someone who listens. Caprio's eyes linger on the image longer than anyone expects. For a moment, the sounds of the room fade, the air vents hum, the shuffling shoes, the clerk's pen. He looks up. Why did you draw this? He asks gently. The boy lifts his chin. Mom says you're the only one who listens to people now. The sentence lands like a stone dropped in deep water. Conversation dies. Even the impatient glances dissolve into something else. Caprio studies the mother again, her rigid posture, the way her shoulders seem to carry more than one day's trouble. This is no longer just about a car left where it shouldn't be. He sets the drawing carefully on the bench, smoothing the corner. All right, he says quietly. Let's find out what no one's been listening to. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Caprio keeps the drawing in front of him, palm resting near the edge of the page as if it might blow away. Ms. Carter, he says, voice softer now, I'd like you to tell me what brought you here. Not just the ticket, the whole picture. And what this, he taps the corner of the sketch, means. She swallows, glances at her son, then back at the bench. I'm a medical assistant, sir. Days shift at a clinic. Nights, I clean offices downtown 3 times a week. Her words are plain, stripped of drama. It covers the rent. Most months. And you're raising him alone? Caprio asks. Yes. Her hands knot together again. His dad, he's not in the picture. The boy sits perfectly still, eyes fixed on the drawing instead of the room. You said this happened at the children's hospital, the judge prompts. She nods. My son has asthma. The kind they say he might grow out of, but right now it's bad. He's had a few bad attacks this year. She takes a breath. That morning, the school nurse called. Said he was wheezing, lips a little blue. They wanted an ambulance. She pauses, as if choosing which truth to tell first. I asked if I could drive him instead. Our insurance has a big deductible. The last time we called an ambulance, it took me months to catch up. Her voice tightens. So I left work, got there as fast as I could. When I pulled up to the hospital, the only open spots were way down the hill. I saw the sign, I knew it was wrong. But he could barely breathe, and she stops, blinking hard. I parked. A murmur moves through the benches, no outrage, just weary recognition. How long were you inside? Caprio asks. Longer than the ticket says, she admits. They had to give him a nebulizer, watch his oxygen. By the time they let us go, the car was already written up. She presses her lips together. I figured I'd deal with it later. But later doesn't come easily when you're on 2 jobs. The judge listens without interruption, only a slight tightening around his eyes. This isn't your first ticket near that hospital, is it? He asks carefully. She exhales. No, sir. I paid the others. Took out one of those payday loans once. Ended up paying back 3 times what the ticket cost. I told myself it was just temporary. Just until things got better. He glances again at the drawing. And why did your son draw me in a hospital bed? She looks at the boy. You tell him, honey. The child shifts in his chair but doesn't look away from the bench. When my grandpa had his heart surgery, he says quietly, he watched your videos on the iPad. The ones where you talk to people. He picks at the edge of his notebook. He said you made him feel less scared. Like somebody was still, kind. A few people in the gallery bow their heads. Ms. Carter adds, voice barely above a whisper, he passed last year. My dad. But when my boy got sick, he started asking if there was anybody who'd actually listen to us. I told him about you. About the judge from the videos. She manages a small, shaky smile. So he drew what he wished he had in the room that day. Caprio's fingers rest on the sketch again, tracing nothing in particular. The case file beside it suddenly looks thinner, almost irrelevant. All right, he says quietly. The law has its version of today. I think we've just heard yours. Caprio studies the mother for a long moment, then flips back through the stack of citations. Something isn't aligning. The pattern is too irregular, too scattered to match only hospital emergencies. Ms. Carter, he begins gently, the tickets from the hospital, I understand those. But these others? He taps 2 slips dated weeks apart, issued blocks away from her workplace. Were those emergencies too? She freezes. Her son looks up at her, sensing the shift. Tell him, Mom, the boy whispers, barely audible. The gallery quiets. Even the shuffling of feet stops. She inhales, slow and sharp. Some of them weren't emergencies, she admits. Sometimes I'd get off my first shift late, and the only spaces left were restricted. I took them. I shouldn't have, I know that. Caprio watches her, expression unreadable, sensing there's more. What about this one? he asks, raising a citation from a street near her apartment complex. 2 in the same week. Her eyes flicker. She hesitates. That wasn't the hospital, either. The courtroom doors open softly. An officer steps inside, Officer Martinez, the one who wrote one of the earlier tickets. He clears his throat. Your Honor, if I may. I was the responding officer on one of those. This is unusual. Officers rarely volunteer context. Caprio nods. Martinez stands straighter. When I approached her car that night, she wasn't angry. She was crying. I asked what was wrong, but she just kept repeating something about losing the apartment. She didn't want it recorded, so I didn't put it in the notes. The room tightens with collective attention. Caprio turns back to Ms. Carter. Is this true? Are you at risk of losing your housing? Her composure fractures. Shoulders drop. She looks suddenly much smaller. Yes, she whispers. But not because of the tickets. Her son slides his hand into hers. She squeezes it, then forces herself to continue. My landlord, he doesn't allow tenants with medical liabilities. That's what he calls it. If he finds out my son's condition got worse, if he finds out we've had more emergencies, he'll refuse to renew the lease. He told another family the same thing last year. Her voice cracks. I didn't want to end up on the street with a sick child. A gasp ripples across the benches. It's the kind of unfairness people know happens, but hearing it spoken aloud cuts differently. The judge leans back slowly. So you've been hiding your son's medical needs from your landlord to avoid eviction? She nods. And the extra tickets? She wipes her cheek with the sleeve of her coat. Those days, I wasn't rushing to the hospital. I was sitting in my car around the corner, waiting for him to fall asleep before going inside. So he wouldn't cough in front of anyone. So they wouldn't notice. Even the hum of the light seems to fade. Caprio folds his hands, absorbing the weight of what she's finally revealed. The puzzle is no longer scattered, it's painfully clear now. Ms. Carter, he says quietly, thank you for telling the truth. Sometimes what doesn't make it into the report, is exactly what matters most. The boy sits a little closer to his mother, as if relieved she no longer has to carry the secret alone. And the entire room waits, sensing that whatever comes next will change more than just a parking violation. Caprio sits back, studying the drawing again. Something in the lower corner catches his attention this time, a small block of text sketched in a child's uneven handwriting. But before he speaks, a movement in the gallery interrupts him. A woman in a navy sweater stands, hesitating near the aisle. She looks mid-40s, professional, carrying a folder tucked against her chest. Your Honor, may I address the court? I believe I know Ms. Carter. Her voice is steady but respectful. Caprio gestures for her to approach. She introduces herself quietly. I'm Emily Graves, Social Services. I'm here today for another case, but I couldn't sit still listening. She turns to the mother. We met at the intake office 3 months ago. You were filing an appeal. The mother stiffens, embarrassed. Caprio leans forward. What appeal was this? Emily opens her folder. Her application for housing assistance. She's been in the queue 7 months. Her paperwork was misplaced twice, once during a staffing turnover, once during a system migration. It happens more than it should. A wave of murmurs rolls through the room. A man in the back mutters, 7 months. Unbelievable. Another nods, clearly having lived the same bureaucracy. Caprio turns to Ms. Carter. Why didn't you mention this before? She swallows hard. Because I'm ashamed. I'm working. I'm trying. Asking for help feels like failing. Her son shifts toward her, gripping her sleeve. Mom, just tell him. Please. The phrase lands with startling weight. It's not defiance, it's exhaustion, the kind a child shouldn't know. Emily continues gently, she qualifies for aid, rent support, medical subsidies. But nothing has reached her yet. She's been calling weekly. Caprio nods slowly, absorbing each word. Then he lifts the boy's drawing again, bringing it closer to the bench's light. Everyone leans in. In the corner, barely noticeable earlier, sits a simple sketch of a square building. On its door, written in shaky pencil strokes, notice to vacate, 30 days. A cold hush sweeps the courtroom. Caprio's voice lowers, almost a whisper. Ms. Carter, your son knew about the eviction notice? Her eyes close. I tried to hide it. But he found the paper in my bag. I told him it was nothing. He didn't believe me. The boy's small voice trembles. I didn't want us to sleep in the car again. The air seems to stop moving. People shift uncomfortably, some blinking hard, others swallowing emotion they didn't expect to feel. Caprio places the drawing carefully on the bench, as though it were something fragile. We are no longer discussing a parking violation, he says at last. We're discussing a family trying to survive on borrowed time. The turning point is unmistakable, nothing in the room feels the same anymore. The room feels heavier now, as if everyone is suddenly aware that they've stepped into a much larger story than a traffic summons. Caprio straightens the papers in front of him, returning the courtroom to its formal rhythm, at least on the surface. Officer Daniels, he says calmly, please step forward and describe the events of the day this citation was issued. The officer approaches. His voice is steady, but his expression carries something close to regret. I remember it clearly, Your Honor. She pulled up fast, too fast. I was about to signal her to move, but when I reached the driver's side, she was carrying the boy. He looked pale, almost limp. She didn't argue. She just kept saying, please, I need to get him inside. He hesitates. I didn't write her up right away. I waited. But when I returned 15 minutes later and saw her car still there, protocol required the citation. This confession draws sympathetic murmurs. A grandmother in the second row nods, lips pressed tight as if revisiting her own memories. Caprio requests the hospital area surveillance recording. The screen flickers, then reveals the grainy footage, the mother rushing across the sidewalk, the child's arms hanging loosely, her own steps unsteady. A quiet gasp ripples through the room. No one speaks. Even the hum of the air conditioner seems to retreat. She wasn't disregarding safety, the officer adds. She was overwhelmed. Caprio takes a slow breath, then turns to the social worker. Ms. Graves, what else should the court know? Emily opens her folder again. Her rent increases over the last year have been aggressive. And the eviction threat? Highly questionable. The property owner has a record of pushing out tenants he deems high risk. Chronic illness falls under what he calls liability factors. It's not legal, but tenants rarely fight back. The tension in the room sharpens. Someone mutters, that's happening everywhere, with the tone of someone who knows it too well. The judge glances at the mother. Is this accurate? She nods, barely audible. He told me he preferred renters with predictable households. He said sick kids scare buyers. Disgust passes through the audience like a cold draft. Then, unexpectedly, the boy steps forward. Your Honor, we have another picture. Caprio gestures gently. May I see it? The child reaches into his backpack, retrieving a folded page. When he hands it over, the courtroom leans in instinctively. This drawing is different, storm-dark clouds, boxes stacked on a sidewalk, the mother and son huddled under a street lamp. But there is one bright detail, a tall figure holding an umbrella over them. Caprio recognizes the outline instantly. It's him. He sets the drawing down carefully, without a word. For a moment, it appears he's holding his breath. The mother covers her face. The boy lowers his eyes, as if afraid he's revealed too much. Caprio finally speaks, voice quieter than before, yet firm enough to steady the room. Officer Daniels, Ms. Graves, and all present, what we have here is not defiance of the law. It is the story of a family navigating circumstances most would struggle to withstand. He looks at the mother, really looks. You've carried this weight alone. And even then, you try to shield your child from the truth. Her chin trembles, but she doesn't look away. Today, Caprio continues, we're not dealing with infractions. We're dealing with a life unraveling one thread at a time. A long silence follows, the kind that isn't uncomfortable but reverent, people instinctively recognizing they're witnessing something human, vulnerable, and achingly real. Finally, Caprio leans forward, both hands resting on the bench. We now have the full picture, he says softly. And it's time to decide what justice truly means for this family. The entire room sits motionless, waiting for what comes next. Caprio folds his hands, the drawings positioned gently before him like fragile evidence of something deeper than any legal code. He clears his throat, not for authority, but to steady the weight of what must be said. Ms. Carter, he begins quietly, this court has reviewed every detail. And the law, when applied blindly, would demand fines, penalties, maybe even further hearings. He pauses. But justice is something different. The mother looks up, startled by the tone. The boy clings to her arm, wide-eyed. I am dismissing every citation, Caprio declares. All of them. A soft wave of relieved murmurs spreads through the room. The mother's hand flies to her mouth. She blinks fast, as if unsure she heard correctly. But Caprio raises a finger, not finished. However, he continues, this doesn't end with dismissals. We are forwarding your case to the city's legal aid office. Effective immediately, they will intervene on your behalf regarding your landlord's actions. The courtroom goes utterly still for a heartbeat, then an almost inaudible exhale sweeps through the gallery. It feels like the room itself is breathing again. The mother whispers, thank you. Thank you, Your Honor, but the judge is already leaning toward the boy. And you, Caprio says softly, may I keep your drawings? Both of them. The child hesitates, glancing at his mother, then nods. Only if you promise we don't have to leave our home. Caprio's expression warms with a sadness that comes from years of hearing things a child should never say. I promise I will do everything within my authority, he replies. You have my word. The boy offers a small, trembling smile, one that somehow feels heavier than any verdict. But the room isn't done transforming. A man in the third row slowly rises. Broad-shouldered, wearing a jacket with a construction company logo. He clears his throat. Judge, if I may. Caprio nods. I own a few rental properties. Good ones. If this family ever needs a place, no credit checks, no extra fees. And I'll cover whatever they owe now. No kid should worry about where he sleeps. Gasps, then a hush. The mother breaks, tears spill, raw and unfiltered. She tries to speak but can't. The boy wraps his arms around her waist. Caprio looks at the man with something close to gratitude. That is a rare offer, he says. And a decent one. The man shrugs, uncomfortable with the attention. Sometimes you just see something you can't ignore. Caprio returns his gaze to the mother and child. You see, Ms. Carter, the law sets boundaries. But compassion sets direction. Today, this courtroom has chosen direction. He lifts the child's second drawing, the one with the umbrella. I am not the hero in this picture. The hero is a child who still sees hope when he's standing in the rain. The gallery is silent. Not for lack of emotion, but because every person is holding it close, afraid that sound will break the moment. Caprio signs the dismissal paperwork, then rests his hand briefly atop the drawings. Case dismissed, he says, though the words feel inadequate for what has unfolded. The mother rises slowly, clutching her son's hand. She tries to thank him again, but her voice catches. Instead, she simply nods, a gesture filled with more gratitude than any speech. As they turn to leave, the boy stops, looks back at the judge, and gives a small wave. Caprio returns it with a gentle lift of his hand. The gallery begins a soft, respectful applause, not celebratory, but reverent. Caprio bows his head slightly. Not triumphant. Simply human. Remember, he says to the room, the law is made of words. Justice is made of people. And today, a child reminded us of the difference. The door closes behind the family. The courtroom exhales. And for a brief, quiet moment, everyone feels the world tilt just a little toward mercy.